there's, of course, as always, a lot going on in the news. I've got a big stack of stories I want to share with you. But where I wanted to start is trade. And what it, what's so-called, what this new religion, and this religion kind of came of age in the 70s. Nixon and his entree to China, Nixon goes to China and all that, was some little tiny beginning of it. But the idea had been pushed for a long time, mostly by libertarians. The libertarians, in fact, their modern libertarian party, if you read the platform, they don't believe in national borders. They believe that people and products should be able to move across national borders without hindrance. In other words, the United States should end all of our immigration laws, all of those protectionist laws that maintain a labor force that is, relatively consonant with the demand for labor, and just let anybody come into the country who wants to, anytime they want, under any circumstances, because, hey, it's good for business, right? The larger the labor force, the lower the price you have to pay for labor. It's a real simple equation, and of course, that's why libertarians love it. Now, libertarians haven't been able to get their way. They've been pushing for this since the 1970s. Arguably, they've been pushing for this since the 1940s, when the predecessor to the Libertarian Party, the FEE, was started as, basically a front group for big business. The Libertarian Party is still a front group for big business. So they haven't achieved their whole goal, but they got about halfway there with NAFTA and the WTO and all this kind of stuff, where they, instead of saying anybody, any cheap worker or anybody from a really poor country who wants to come to the United States can come to the United States and work for, $3 an hour and take jobs away from American citizens. Instead of saying that, they said, well, they did two things happen. One, in 1986, after Reagan did his immigration reform and his amnesty, he explicitly stopped the enforcement of laws preventing employers from hiring people who are not citizens, which led to, 11 to 15 million people coming to this country looking for work. And, perfectly understandable. And a result that Reagan and his advisors, clearly saw coming. And, obviously we need to do something about that with regard to comprehensive immigration reform. Folks are here. Let's work this stuff out. But let's not repeat that. Let's create a system that actually works for us and for immigrants. But since, that was just a little tiny piece of it, the big piece of it was so-called free trade. It was the functional equivalent, right? If you can't bring Vietnamese workers to the United States or Chinese workers to the United States like the railroads did in the 1870s, which led to the Chinese Exclusion Act of as I recall, 1882, the only law that Congress has ever passed that specifically forbids a particular race of people from coming into the United States. And it was passed in response to, backlash from working people who were upset that Chinese workers were being brought in by the railroads to bust the early union movement and, all that kind of stuff. But anyhow, if we can't bring Chinese workers to the United States, let's just take the jobs to China. Let's move the factories there and get the work done. Let's move the factories to Vietnam. Let's move them to Malaysia. Let's move them to Indonesia. Let's move them to Mexico. Let's just move these factories anywhere the labor is cheap, and you don't have to deal with the blowback, the cultural blowback of, unlimited immigration, which is what the libertarians want. So you do it the Republican way, which is, kind of half and half. And there's two great pieces on this over at the economyincrisis.org website. The first by James Moreland. He writes, Detroit is an example of everything that is wrong with our nation. July 18th, 2013, the city of Detroit filed for Chapter 9 bankruptcy. Now, here's what most Americans don't know. Before Reaganism, in the 1960s, before Reaganism, before free trade, Detroit was the fourth largest city in the United States and was the wealthiest city in America. And it wasn't because they had the most billionaires. New York City has always had the monopoly on that. It was because they had the strongest and healthiest middle class. Middle class workers in Detroit earning the equivalent in today's dollars of anywhere from $35,000 to $75,000 a year, just working on the assembly line, putting their kids through school, buying homes, buying new cars, taking vacations, having fully paid health insurance, having fully paid 2 weeks of vacation, starting out. I mean, all of this stuff, this created the wealthiest city in America in the 1960s, Detroit. Now the population has gone from 2 million in 1960 to 714,000. The unemployment rate is 29%. A third of Detroit has been abandoned. The city is filled with just empty houses and row after. I mean, it looks like post-World War II, parts of post-World War II Germany. And James Moreland writes, unfortunately, Detroit is not alone. All across America, cities are being devastated by their own collapsed manufacturing basis. Detroit not only had the highest median income in the United States in the 1950s and 1960s, it also had the highest home ownership rate. Now it's a devastated city. So what devastated Detroit? Free trade. It's real simple. I mean, you could just boil it down to that, so-called free trade. That's what devastated Detroit. And now in this other blog by economyincrisis.org, looking back at the year 2013, and not just Detroit, by the way, it's devastated cities all over the United States. It's particularly hard hit the so-called Rust Belt, the manufacturing centers of America. But before that, you know, I mean, Baltimore, they used to make textiles. Manchester, New Hampshire used to be textiles. I mean, it's just all over this country. Wherever there was a river running through, you'd have a water wheel on it. It would be generating electricity for manufacturing. So anyhow, the other problem is that we're being killed by our imports from Mexico, specifically the food. Just looking back at 2013, the last year for which we have statistics, Margaret Elkins writing for economyincrisis.org. In 2013, 631 people in the United States became ill due to veggies and cilantro coming from Mexico. 84 people from cucumbers containing salmonella. Not only have we gone from a trade surplus with Mexico to a trade deficit and lost over 700,000 jobs just because of NAFTA, and now we no longer know where our meat is coming from because the World Trade Organization said, you know, your COOL laws, your country of origin labeling, COOL, they're illegal because they restrain trade. So you can no longer, I mean, this was just a few months ago, you can no longer label where your meat came from. The CDC estimates that 48 million Americans get sick, 128,000 are hospitalized, 3,000 die from foodborne illnesses. If you go back and you look at the CDC's website, cdc.gov, this is the October 29, 2013 final case outbreak for the cyclosporiasis epidemic from Mexico. 25 states and New York City, Arkansas, California, Connecticut, Florida, Georgia, Illinois, Iowa, Kansas, Louisiana. Poison all over America.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
So we lose our jobs, we send them overseas, they get the wealth, they get the, you know, China blooms and explodes, and what do we get? We get the poison. Cool.
To watch more clips from our programs, hit the Watch More Videos button over here. And please be sure to hit the handy-dandy subscribe button so you'll always be up to date. Tag, you're it.